Hi there. In this video, we'll take a quick look at how to use Filezilla, an FTP client, and specifically we'll look at how we can transfer local files to a remote web server so they can be viewed on the World Wide Web. So the first thing I'll do is I'll quickly move that folder that I created in the previous video locally, and I'll copy it to the remote folder. The next thing we'll do is we'll take a look at setting up sites under the File menu in Filezilla so that we don't have to enter our credentials and our URL for the remote server every single time we connect to it. So again, for this server, for those of you who are taking my Langara course, it's mylinux.langara.ca, and then you use your username that Langara IT has provided you with. So mine's Flander. I go by Marcus, but my first initial is F, and you'll have a couple of zeros, 2 or 3 zeros, populated with numbers as well at the end of your username. I don't have any because I've been an employee for a long time, and then the password that you were given or that you created for yourself at myLangara. Don't worry about the port, and I'll just choose Quick Connect. So that logs me into the mylinux.langara.ca server, and it takes us right to the root of that server. And again, we have this folder called public_HTML, where we need to put all of the files we wish to share with the World Wide Web. So if I double click on that, that'll put me inside of it. So I presently have a bunch of files and folders. You won't have these necessarily. So I'm going to move that folder, or sorry, I should say copy that folder that I have locally. So I'm just going to go to Documents. So we have our local pane here. So it's this PC, and then it's Marcus. I can actually just go directly to Documents here, and then I'm looking for Marcus websites. There it is there. If I double click on it, it's Langara. So I just want to have that Langara inside of public_HTML. So I'm just going to drag it into from the left pane into the right pane, and I just make sure I'm clear of any folders just so it doesn't accidentally go into a folder. So basically I don't want any folders selected, just in case if I let go it goes into one of those folders. So right there is good. I'm going to let go, and now we see Langara. Let's just see if what happens if we drag it on top of, for example, JavaScript. It puts that folder inside of JavaScript. I don't want it there, so I'm going to click on that, and then I can right click and choose delete. So again, you want to be clear of any folder. So if I double click on this little folder ... that puts me at the top level of public_HTML. If I double click on Langara, I see I have a CSS images index just like I have inside of that folder. So everything, the entire folder was uploaded, all of the files it contained as well. Now, to view these files on the World Wide Web, we have a slightly different URL than what we entered here. And I'll quickly show you what that is. So I'm going to go to Chrome, and I'll just move my Chrome in here. So the URL that you need to visit in order to see your web files, index.html is one of them, is mylinux, and you can actually see it populate in there, mylinux.langara.ca/tilde, which is next to the 1, so shift the key next to the 1, and then your user ID. So again, mine's Flander. I press enter, This is just the root of public_HTML, and it's opening index.html by default, but we have a folder within that called Langara. And I used a capital letter. Again, I said I don't do that, but I remembered that I did. I press enter, and notice I get a blank screen because index.html is present in that directory, but it doesn't have anything in it yet. We haven't added the HTML to it. Now let me just quickly show you how that index.html works. What I'm going to do is quickly rename that file under public_HTML Langara. I'm going to call it index555.html, and we'll see what happens. So I'm just going to click on that. I'm going to right click, choose rename, and I'm just going to type 555 and press enter. Now if I go to this location, I'm just going to refresh. Notice I get a 403 error. There's no index document. So the reason that we create that index document, it's basically the first document that will be opened if you don't specify a file name after your folder name in our URL. So we just specified Langara with no file name, so it'll always open index. That's why we call things index. We can do this locally as well. So I'm just going to rename that, and you'll see that everything works just fine. So now when I refresh, it actually opens. It's actually opening. Right now we're looking at index, even though we don't see that file name. So the benefit of this is when you have an index file in a folder, you don't have to enter a file name after the slash. It's just that last folder. You don't even need to enter that final slash. It'll put it there for you. The browser will put it there for you, but you don't need to enter that. So the next thing what I'm going to do is actually save the credentials I entered to something called a site in Filezilla. So I'm done with my browser. I don't need to see that anymore. So presently we have a local website. This is everything we'll be working on locally. We don't need to upload it until we're ready to share it. So we'll work with things locally. We'll view them locally, and then once we're happy with how they look locally, then we'll upload it to the remote server. And here's a remote server, and you notice that everything is identical. So once we have that arrangement, we can set up a site. So I'm going to go File, Site Manager. I presently have no sites, so I'm going to choose New Site, and I'm going to call this Langara. I'm going to use exactly the name I used for the folder, which is my convention. Always call this everything the same things. Now you don't have to worry about the protocol. All we need is the host, so that's my Linux. The port we don't have to worry about, that'll be automatically picked up. We don't have to worry about that. Login type normal works fine, and then your user ID and password. Now I'm going to add some advanced settings as well. We already know that this stuff works because we just connected. So under advanced, I'm going to pick my local directory, and the reason for this is we can look at something called synchronized browsing, which allows us to compare visually what we have locally to what we're going to have remotely. So I'm just going to browse for that folder, and it already went there because I've gone there before, but it's under this PC, Documents, Marcus Websites, and that's the local folder that contains all of the local files for this site. And then the default remote directory will be public_HTML, slash, and then Langara with a capital L. And since that folder already exists, I've already created that folder, then we're safe to enter that. So it's generally best to place that folder there before you create that default remote directory. And I'm going to use synchronized browsing. So what that means is it'll always, if I change my local folder view in Filezilla, it'll also change my remote folder view. So we don't have to worry about navigating in two places at the same time. And you can choose directory comparison as well. What that means is it highlights any missing directories. And we don't need to change anything else. This is all I ever change. And I'll choose connect. I'll just choose OK. That'll save everything. And then if we go back to File, Site Manager, we could choose our site and then connect. And it's given us this green highlight to let us know that everything that exists locally exists remotely. So what happens if we, for example, I'm going to add a file locally. So I'll just do that via my file manager like we saw before. I'm just going to say about us.html. I'll use a dash. And I'll delete that .text. Again, remember that I have this view setting. I have show hide. I'm showing file name extensions, which is important. Otherwise, you might end up with two extensions. So if I refresh, notice I get a yellow highlight for About Us. It indicates that that file is not present on the remote directory, so we can know to upload it. So that's basically how we use Filezilla. So again, what we did was we uploaded a folder which contained a bunch of files to a particular directory on our remote server. Of course, we had to connect to that server first of all using credentials. Again, the credentials are the user ID, the password, and the URL, so 3 credentials. We then created a site and then set up some settings so it's easy to transfer and manipulate these files via the site. Thanks so much for watching.